And good evening, States Rights Radio. This is Federico Lines coming to you live at August 29th at 8:46 p.m. Today is a special episode. We're going to have on the radio, on my podcast, Mr. Robert Beiswenger. He's running for Idaho's 8th State House District up there in the Gem State. And it will be 10 minutes from now where we will have Mr. Beiswenger, and we'll take a short break and come back for more.
Baby face, you got the cutest little baby face. There ain't nobody can ever take your place. Baby face, my poor heart's jumping. You started something, baby face. Well, I'm in heaven when I'm in your fond embrace. Yeah, I didn't need no show, 'cause I just fell in love with your pretty baby face. Oh, let's twist the wire. The girl with the hole in the stocking, but you're a baby face. I'm in heaven when I'm in your fond embrace. Yeah, I never need no shove, 'cause I just fell in love with your pretty baby face.
That was Mr. Bobby Darin, Babyface, Mr. Bobby Darin. And it's 8:49, almost 10 more minutes till I meet podcast with Mr. Robert Beiswenger. He's running for State House District number 8 in the Gem State of Idaho, the sovereign state of Idaho. We're going to have a quite little chat with him, see what he is all about. What does he want to do for Idaho itself? Not for the rest of the country, not for the Rocky Mountain region, but for Idaho itself. Tune in here, only in States Rights Radio, where we'll find out what Mr. Beiswenger is all about and what he represents for this, what he will represent for the sovereign state of Idaho. And we'll be tuning in shortly, and we'll be right back after this.
That's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. Up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I did 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, bless my soul, you know 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. company store.
You, then the left one will. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
And that was Johnny Cash, 16 Tons and a Heart of Gold. 16 Tons, singer Johnny Cash. Now it is 8:53, almost 7 minutes till I speak with Mr. Beiswenger, candidate for 8th District of the sovereign state of Idaho. A little bit history about Idaho. Idaho is roughly about 90 to 95% Republican. They've had some great legislations out there. A little bit of sad is Gary Glenn, who was a friend of mine on Facebook. He was a state representative, or former state representative, Gary Glenn in Michigan, passed away recently, and he was a fighter while he lived in Idaho, and he passed Idaho's right to work law, that Idaho promises freedom and liberty for the labor movement and for the workers. And he did quite a lot for Idaho, and if it wasn't for him, Idaho wouldn't be right to work and wouldn't share the fruits and labor of all the workers out there. He also worked along Charlton Heston, as I saw in his writings and post, while Charlton Heston was the right to work spokesperson in 1986. And after that, Idaho has been flourishing economically, not only with its right-to-work law, but with its lenient tax policies and lenient regulations. Idaho has shown great strength in that, and we hope to hear more about Idaho by Mr. Robert Beiswenger to see what we can expect when he wins, if he wins, and hope he wins his 8th district in the state house. Like I said, Idaho shares some great economic wealth due to its right to work law. And I remember just a little quiet story when I lived in Montana many years ago. I drove through Idaho, and Montana is a beautiful state. I was also a fighter for the right to work movement, and Montana has a beautiful scenery. I mean, you cannot argue with Montana's scenery, but when it comes to economic growth, Idaho beats it by a long run. And Idaho has a huge potato plant with a massive workforce down there in Pocatello, if it still does, when I saw it. Bottling plants of Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Budweiser, you name it. And then, of course, you have Boise, which is the major city and its state capital. And it's kind of like the Silicon Valley of the Rocky Mountain region, and has made wonders. And many Californians that were once living in California have mostly moved to Idaho to share its glory of economic growth and economic value. And we'll see what Mr. Beiswenger says to that, if he wants to invite other people from other states to enjoy the wealth that Idaho has. And I'm looking forward to it. We got 4 more minutes, and we'll take a quick little... we'll keep on. We only got 4 more minutes, so we'll just chat a little more about Idaho and the Rocky Mountain region and when I was there. And, when I was in Montana trying to pass a right-to-work law, my main focus was, Montana's surrounded by right-to-work states, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Idaho. But, Wyoming also shares some good economic growth, but not as much as Idaho. Idaho really has outgrown Big Sky country, and that was my main expertise, my main argument towards Montana passing a right to work law was look towards Idaho. I mean, Idaho shares some massive economic growth and massive freedom, and sadly Montana didn't help it. But I looked into Idaho, and I've been there. I've been there on the north and the south. Went to Coeur d'Alene, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I wish Montana could share that same growth and glory and economic glory as Idaho has, but sadly they don't want to. So Idaho's all by itself. I mean, it has Washington State, which also Washington State is suffering. So Idaho, it's by itself promoting its wealth and freedom and liberty all across its great borderland. So I will, let's see if Mr. Beiswenger is available right now, and we'll touch base and welcome him to the show. Give us a moment, and we'll be right back. And we're back live with Mr. Robert Beiswenger, candidate for Idaho's State House District number 8. How you doing, Mr. Beiswenger? Rob?
Having a great night. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I would like to, I know I've had you on the show the last time, but I want to welcome you back again and tell us why you're running and what are you trying to make Idaho sovereign again?
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely did not come to Idaho. I didn't grow up here. Didn't ever think I'd live in Idaho, quite frankly. Kind of just one event led to another, and I moved out here in 2019. This was, the pre-apocalypse, as I like to say, before the COVID, apocalypse. And so we got out here, and I kind of, world got turned upside down. And so, we had the shutdowns here, in Idaho, but not quite to the extent that maybe some, Australia or California, New York City, things like that. So I was really kind of disturbed at what happened. There was a lady in a park, took her kids to the park during the COVID stuff. She's outside in a playground with some other parents and kids, and the police here arrested her. And this was, right down the road from where we were living, 20 minutes away in a reasonably conservative area like Idaho, kind of people outdoors mindset here. They wouldn't put up with stuff like that, but they did, or at least the elected officials did, and nobody really kind of pushed back too much on them. So I found that all very disturbing. And then, of course, the decay of the COVID vaccine came out, and people were pushing that and to take it. And then, should you lose your job if you don't take it? Those kind of issues really got me going. And then we moved into a town called Horseshoe Bend, which is a town about 1,000 people, to Boise County. It's maybe 20 miles north of Boise. And the school there had an assembly. They brought in all the students there who were 14 years old and up. They let the other ones go. And then they said, hey, students, if you would like to have a COVID shot, we'll give you one. And don't worry, if you don't want to tell your parents, we won't tell them either. And the total disrespect for parental rights at that moment just kind of set me over the edge. And I have some political background, which we can talk about, but that really just kind of got me, it broke. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And I was finally willing to kind of do more, and I have been, other than just, pounding away on Facebook. I was willing to actually go out and do other things. So a couple weeks later, I was in Boise, and I ran to my state representative. Her name's Dorothy Moon. And I said, hey, I never met her before. I walked up and introduced myself. I said, hey, can I run this scenario by you? And after telling her, she goes, the trouble is the way Idaho law is written, it's probably technically legal what he did. And so that made me even more frustrated because, I thought, well, certainly this is against the law. Like a school offering an experimental vaccine without notification of the parents and willing to deliberately not tell them seemed almost certainly like that should be against the law. And so about a week after I met with her, she called me and said, hey, I'm actually going to run for Secretary of State. I'd like you to run for my seat. And so we talked about it, talked to my wife, prayed about it, came back the next day and said, okay, I'm willing to do that. So that's the short version of why I decided to run. There's obviously, lots of issues that are important to me. I think definitely our country is moving in the wrong direction on a lot of issues culturally. And obviously, federally in D.C., all kinds of stuff going wrong there, which I can't necessarily solve all those problems from Idaho, but definitely it strengthens my interest and desire to do what I can here. Idaho, has got some issues here that are being affected. We have lots of influx of people coming in. So we have some population growth issues here. Idaho is one of the few states in the country that has a sales tax on groceries. Most states, even like Pennsylvania, where I grew up in, Pennsylvania has lots of taxes. They really like them out there, or at least the elected officials do. But they will exempt groceries from sales tax because they, recognize that the people need to eat. And, with inflation these days, and we have food inflation like 30%. I don't know how much you've been watching your food budget, but I've definitely been watching mine. It's been heading up pretty, strongly, in the past, couple of years. So I think, one thing Idaho could do just to take a little bit of pressure off people is to get rid of that sales tax on groceries. It's not a huge tax. It's not a huge revenue generator from Idaho. It's kind of, to me, an easy win for everybody. We can take, whoever, the General Assembly, the legislature out here could take credit for getting rid of it. People can afford a little more food, put it on their table, take a little bit of this inflationary pressure off them. If you ask me, the inflation is not going away. We've come down in its rate. It used to be like 9%, the way they were calculating it. And now they're saying it's like 4%, which, of course, depends on how you calculate it. But at the same time, even if you go with those officials' numbers, they're still trying to get back to 2%. So we're still 100% higher at 4% than what the stated goals be. So that's going to be a real problem. And I think we're going to have some serious financial troubles, in our country with this inflation. We've had this year, the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in American history. And my guess is those aren't going to be the last ones. It may not happen this fall. It might happen next year. You never know. There's, with financial markets, you have these cascading effects. So sometimes you don't see, all these things play out right away. It's kind of like which snowflake causes the avalanche, right? You never really know which one it's going to be. So and then culturally, we have this transgender movement going on, and so that's this year. There was a vote in Idaho to ban sex change surgeries and pharmaceuticals for minors, so people 17 and under. And the guy I'm running against, his name is Matt Bundy. He voted to allow sex change surgeries and drugs, and he was the only Republican in the House to vote against it. He's had a variety of excuses as to why he voted that way. I think like maybe 3 Republicans in the Senate voted for it, but all the Democrats, of course, voted with them on those. But yeah, Matt Bundy was the only Republican in the House to vote against that bill, and kind of knew, again, here's another point where, well, I just couldn't stay silent anymore. If someone can't understand that's unacceptable for children. Now, if you're 35 years old and you want to, that's what you want to pay a doctor to do, I'm not going to stand in your way politically. But for children, I think we know there's certain things we don't let children do. And, we don't let them drink alcohol. We don't let them go to war. We don't let them drive a car until it's an appropriate age. And certainly we shouldn't be letting them, having sex change operations and such until they're of a mature age where they could decide something like that, but a little more sound of mind. Anyway, so kind of talked a lot there without letting you talk. Should I pitch it back to you?
Yeah, no, it's great. You mentioned taxation. We'll get into the culture a little bit later in the segment, but taxation. What would you do? Would you be open to request a resolution to the State House and to the State Legislature of Idaho, to your congressional delegation? Because the real issue why I'm bringing this up is the burden that the federal taxation has brought upon the sovereign states, which is the 16th Amendment. Would you be a few legislators out there in Idaho and in other states that would open up a resolution to repeal the 16th Amendment?
For the direct election of senators?
That also, and bring back the senators to be appointed by the state legislatures as their right should be. But on taxation, because my upcoming book, The Road to Liberty, bringing an end to the 16th and 17th on principal amendments, there's no. I have always said this. I have not denied the right of the federal government to tax. Indirectly, of course, but directly, they don't have any power. So I'm just, bringing it out there to you and your fellow Idahoans and in your Rocky Mountain region to see if they want to propose a resolution to begin the process to repeal this egregious amendment, the 16th Amendment. The 17th Amendment, that's also on principle, but it's more on principle, the 16th Amendment.
Oh, so the income tax and all that, right?
Yes, and then
gotcha.
with the income tax, we'll we can finally get rid of the Federal Reserve Act. All those acts that came in reference to the 16th Amendment will become null and void because again, the Revenue Act 1913 doesn't have any right for the federal government to tax your income and food and gas and all that. So. I know another friend of mine has welcomed that tax on gas tax to help promote the highways, and I sometimes call him an Eisenhower lover, but rest assured. But not you, Rob. But it's something that I've really read up on that it's the 16th Amendment that creates this inflation. The Federal Reserve creates this credit dismay that we're having interest rates go high, interest go low, and all that. So that's just what I'm out there. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, it's as Al says, it seems like an easy thing to support. If we get rid of the federal income tax, that certainly seems nice. I guess I haven't really thought through as to how that would all play out in terms of what is there going to be a substitute, or are we just talking about reducing government spending, which would be amazing if we could do that. Because obviously, we can complain about the taxes in Idaho, but the taxes federally are much, much worse. And not to mention, despite them being so high and so oppressive, we still are some $30 trillion in debt, as you know. I mean, was it 32, 33? I've kind of lost track at this point how bad it was. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We thought 20 trillion was just horrific, and we've just gone totally over the cliff here in terms of debt. And that's part of the reason we have inflation, too. Is just the excessive money printing and availability and the lower interest rates. So that's why the Federal Reserve now has been ratcheting up interest rates at a high point. And every time the Federal Reserve has ever increased rates like this, it's always followed by a recession. Now, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually does. And so we're likely headed towards economic, tougher times here in the near future. People are going to have a hard time affording their homes. They're going to, that kind of thing, buying cars, all the stuff people finance typically. Back in Indiana, I used to live there. There were lots of RV makers. And when that financial crisis happened in like 2008 and 2009 and some of that stuff, the banking loans really dried up really hard. Well, people couldn't buy a boat. They couldn't buy an RV, which sounds like a luxury, but there's people who make a living making those things. And a lot of their hours were cut in half. They were laid off entirely. Really created a really hard time. So, I'm not saying they shouldn't raise interest rates. They probably should. They probably should have been higher a long time ago. But it is going to lead to some financial hardships, for people around the country and Idaho too, of course. So yeah, we definitely need to reduce the taxing in Washington, but we can't. Fortunately, we've also got to reduce spending. We just seem to have no appetite nationally to reduce the spending, and until we want to do that, if we lower taxes, and keep spending, it's really what's it really going to do. So, we do have part of Idaho's problem here is we take a lot of federal money now. I think they're talking like 40% of the state budget of Idaho comes from the federal government at this point. And so a lot of Republicans in the legislature, and I assume the Democrats too, but the Republicans I know of, they're nervous about, offending the federal government for fear they're going to, pull back, the money or so they want to give in to the rules and stuff the strings that come from Washington, D.C. If you want this education money, you need to do this. Oh, if you want this Medicaid money, you need to do that. And so instead of being free, independent 50 laboratories like you'd want a country like this to be, where we can all kind of do different things, experiment, say, Idaho's doing this stuff really great, and you know what, Ohio is doing this stuff good, and over here they're doing this, and we can all kind of learn from each other, feed off each other, and modify our programs, to fit our population. We really have, really a lot of control, coming from Washington, D.C., because they're dumping so much money in here, and no one's really got the guts to kind of start, pushing back away from that a little bit.
No, yeah, absolutely, and that's you touched a very good point that a majority of red states, and again, I've had this discussion with several friends of mine that even the blue states take money from the federal government. So we've all become an American dependent of states instead of sovereign, and that's really sad because I don't think you want to pay for Florida's new Bright Line Railway, and I don't want to pay for giving subsidies to wine country up there in Sun Valley, which I'm sure that the wine is better than California's wine. But it's a thing that congressional agents from all across the country should really stop being dependent of the federal government. Right now, there's a hurricane on the west side of Florida, and my dear esteemed Governor Dependent, is now seeking federal aid to help out, the Natural Relief Fund. As I was critical with Hawaii accepting federal relief fund, I'm also critical of Florida because I don't believe that's the proper role of the federal government. So, I mean, it sounds like, you're willing to take that stab, and I hope that that's your message across to Idahoans, that, you want to keep Idaho's money in Idaho, and you don't want to accept any funds from the federal government, which it's great, and I hope that you do pull through, and that's the message that you want to give out, because each state needs to be sovereign, and again, as in my first book, State Sovereignty, each state must be independent and sovereign to do that. So,
Sure.
Yeah. So, but my question still stands: Would you be kind to support a resolution to your delegation in Congress to repeal the 16th Amendment?
Oh, I would consider it. I guess I'm going to take a little more time to delve into it. I mean, it seems fine. And I mean, what as you were asking the question, one of the things I thought of is, look, until that was enacted, there were no federal income taxes. I mean, this country existed for over 100 years without any of that. And certainly they have plenty of ways to collect taxes these days. I guess what I worried is okay, so you axe the income tax, they come back with a national sales tax on you. And maybe, is that better or worse? I think I just have to. I don't know the answer to that quite off the top of my head here. Well, definitely I'm in favor of lower taxes, just and lower spending, all that kind of stuff.
Well, the thing is that with getting rid of that power to tax, as the 16th Amendment gives Congress, you won't have that power to even create a sales tax because Congress won't have the authority anymore. So that will be left up to the states to create that. Its own taxation. So, for example, you mentioned Idaho has sales tax on groceries, which it's a heavy burden because you're also collecting federal sales tax and federal property tax and a state tax. So that will reduce it. So as I'm a big fan of Ron Paul, and I had this in my last Sunday segment with my friend. As I much admire Ron Paul, but his abolish the Fed or audit the Fed won't really help because, you abolish the Federal Reserve, in 2 seconds, Congress will pass another central banking system. So you got, and keep in mind that the 16th Amendment came first before the Federal Reserve, so you cut that bleeding off and you heal that bleeding, and then you'll stop the spending, you'll stop the taxing, and that's really what it's happening to this country, that it's bleeding too much with no restriction because again the 16th Amendment says that you can tax whenever. So, but. Let's see, I mean, I have high hopes in you, Rob. I think you're a strong constitutionalist. I hope you're not MAGA-ish, but we'll leave that for another discussion. But you are a strong constitutionalist, so I know you'll do the right thing to promote a good agenda, a good fiscal agenda for your home state and your district. And the other one you brought up was the 17th Amendment. How do you feel about returning that power back to the state legislature for elected senators?
I mean, I like the idea. I think that's something I definitely would like to investigate. I don't know if it's at the top of my list, but yeah, I would like to. I think that would be. It would increase the importance of the legislature here. To have something like that. That might be a good something to think of. I know, it's an issue that doesn't get too many headlines out there, but I think that would be something worth looking at. I don't. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know that most of the U.S. senators would like that. But,
yeah.
I mean, one thing is, I think, you would probably take a lot of the money out of those campaigns. If you had to have those guys get votes from, say, 100 people instead of 150 people, whatever your legislature is in your state, you wouldn't need to spend millions of dollars on campaigning across the state, things like that. You'd kind of have it a little more focused and stuff. So, I don't know, there's some upside to that, and then they wouldn't be beholden so much to your PACs and special interests and corporate lobbyists and things, which, those guys aren't doing a lot of favors for our country right now anyway. So, I mean, I think that's an interesting idea, actually. It would solve some problems, for sure.
Okay. And what's the number one issue that's affecting your district, your district? What's the number one issue that's out there?
Well, probably, so of course we're in southwest Idaho, we're right outside of Boise. And growth is the big issue. We have, people, I don't know, maybe half the people I know, I feel like, I didn't do an actual survey here, but I feel like half the people I know are political refugees, quote unquote, from California. There was definitely people from the West Coast who are pouring into Idaho and other states. But, the Boise area, you're talking about 800,000 people in the entire area. So it's a rather small population, even though it's the biggest city in the state. And then, but if you have 50,000 people come in a year, that's a huge percentage increase. So there's construction everywhere. We're on the, they call high desert out here. And so we're kind of on the border between the real desert and not the desert, right? So water is a huge issue out here. So people are digging really deep trying to get access to well and to water. It's a very, tight issue. People are nervous. So basically and I didn't know this, I moved out here, some years ago, that, the snowfall basically up in the mountains that they get during the winter then goes into the rivers underground, stuff like that, and that snowfall that melts is what gets the water for everybody through the rest of the year. Like here in August, we've had about 2.5 inches of rain this August, and that is a record rainfall amount for this area. But yet it's rained twice. So we've had 2 big storms. It has not rained a drop pretty much any other day of this month. So the growth and water issues are really big, infrastructure kind of stuff. Again, we're a small population state, and those are issues that are really getting people nervous here. But then you add inflation to it. You add into these cultural problems of, the transgender stuff, and that's so definitely those are all really hot button issues here, right now for sure.
I see. Yeah, no, that's the second time you brought up. So let's discuss the culture issues of transgender and gender identity. You mentioned parental rights, and your first one was with the COVID vaccine that, where they were telling kids, take this vaccine and don't tell your parents and, blah, blah, blah. And it's a violation of parental rights. But with this thing with transgender, if a juvenile wants to is having a gender identity crisis, wouldn't that be a violation of the law of parental rights if the parent is supporting their children on that?
Well, no, I don't believe it is. You could argue that, I suppose, but the truth is there are certain things that we don't allow our children to do. No matter what, I'm not allowed to abuse my children, even if I think that's appropriate for them. There's that. I cannot start giving my kids cigarettes. I can't give them alcohol. They can't go fight in wars at 16, even though as a parent, I might think that's a good idea. So there are things in society we say, no, this is too far. These surgeries and drugs are permanent, life-altering things. It's not like getting even I don't know if you can get a tattoo before you're 18 legally, but at least a tattoo, is a lot less severe. Yet still, but these surgeries and stuff, are not that. People like that should be seeking help, talking to a therapist or other kinds of things there. But I think we can hold the line here and know that the permanent and permanently altering surgeries and drugs should not be allowed for children for people under 18 years old. I think that's not too much to ask. It's really not too much to ask in any state. Of course, Idaho, here for that too.
Okay. No. I mean, and is that a big consensus around many families out there that this movement of transgender and gender identity is causing an uproar? I mean, from the city, Boise seems the most. It's the largest city, so I would say that it does have some liberal-minded people. So is that kind of something that people are out there?
The city of Boise. I live in the county of Boise, which does not have the city in it. But you're right. The city of Boise has more Democrats than probably almost anywhere in the state, minus a couple of small cities. But yeah, there's you have a Democrat mayor there who won narrowly. Last election. I think she's up for re-election this year. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any pushback on her. On that, definitely are Democrats in Boise and a more Democratic kind of attitude, but still it's Idaho, right? Now, it's also Boise as a big college town. You got Ball State or Boise State University here, and so the big blue football field. So you've got also a college town on top of being, the big city in the state. Now, I mean, I would say yes, this is a hot topic issue. I know plenty of people moving in from California here that have come here because the schools in California were pushing this stuff on their children when they were like 7 years old, like telling them, hey, your kid's actually a girl, it's not a boy. You need to start working on that. And at first, they're kind of actually, oh, well, that's strange. And they didn't know what to make of it. And they realized that some of these folks were really sort of brainwashing them into a certain way of thinking and trying to force it on the parents and then really twist the kids on it. They left, over these issues. So it's an issue we know is hot out west. It's not maybe quite as hot here, but definitely people are wanting to get ahead of it. Hey, we can't take any chances here. We're not going to give up our children to you guys. And so, yeah, it's definitely an issue out here.
Okay. And the majority of Californians moving into Idaho. I remember when I lived in Montana, they were conservatives trying to escape the turmoils of California. Is that something very similar to Idaho?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. It's not just California, but I'd say it's primarily, and people in Idaho, it makes them very nervous. I mean, look what happened to Colorado. I mean, Colorado 20 years ago was a solid red state. George Bush had won it. I think at both of his elections in 2000 and 2004. And then kind of after 2004, it went hard to the left. And again, we're a small population, rural state. You get this flood of people coming in from out of state, and now it's blue. And it's kind of solidly blue at this point. Probably a little bit different flavor blue than California, but definitely it's fairly blue over there. And I think there's a lot of nervousness that would happen in Idaho too. And there's talk of some of the money from the same folks that came into Colorado would turn their efforts here and try and do the same kind of flip it here. And their goal would mainly be to flip the Senate seats out here and take those 2 Senate seats. So, I mean, I don't think something can happen overnight necessarily, but definitely it could. They could work on it and throw a lot of money in here and carry some weight here pretty quickly. Yeah. But I mean, so far, yes, lots of Californians here now. In my experience, people I'm meeting here, maybe circles I'm in, it's mostly, they're moving here because they want to be part of Idaho. They want to be part of Idaho's values. Traditional, hardworking, family, outdoors kind of lifestyle. So I don't feel like there's a big change necessarily in that too much. Obviously, people move for different reasons, but I think most of the people are here that they're trying to get away from, the kind of bad politics that happens out west.
I see. That's good to know. And let's see, what's another issue that? What's another issue that? I mean, Idaho is typically, with the exception of Boise City, but it's about 90% Republican, 95% Republican.
The state?
Yeah.
I mean, the legislature, it's 3-1 Republican, basically 3 and 4-1, stuff like that. So there's super majorities, both in the House and the Senate. Republicans have every statewide seat. Your governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, both congressmen, your senators are all Republican. So it's a solidly Republican state. No question about it. There's definitely an establishment wing out here, and there's more of the conservative wing, and there's battles for stuff like that. Okay. And the establishment wing's a little more pro-government. They're willing to spend more. They're willing to cut deals with Democrats more. Things like that. That's just kind of natural. Is that exactly what you're asking?
So, well, the reason I'm asking is in one of your pamphlets you said to fight for election integrity. What sort of election integrity are you looking for?
Well, something to keep an eye on. I mean, Idaho has, I think, relatively decent election laws, for the most part. There's a few items I think that could be looked at. It'd be interesting to see here. For instance, like if you move to Horseshoe Bend and you file to run for office there, they're going to make sure that your homeowner's exemption is at the same address that you're filing to vote at. That way you can have like multiple locations, can't vote on it. But if your homestead is in another state, they actually wouldn't have a way to know that. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if that's an issue worth looking at. I don't know. I don't have the numbers on me. It's something that I have to have an investigation done on it. But obviously, on the backs of the 2020 election, a lot of people are nervous about their votes. I will say I did go down to Elmore County, which is, a little bit east of here, and talk to the county election official down there. And she gave a rather impressive, presentation on it, on showing here's what we do, and here's how we account this. We use this machine, it's not connected to the internet, and so forth. And, I mean, it was pretty compelling. And I would say from my race last time, I did feel like the results were legitimate, and I felt like the votes, kind of made sense. And I'm not too, look at the numbers like, yeah, that seemed like, those are all legit. We do have some drop boxes, a few drop boxes around the state, which I'm not a big fan of. So I definitely want to take a look at that. And always want to make sure we're kind of keeping an eye on, absentee voting and making sure we're nice and tight on there just so someone can't take advantage of it. I mean, not only do you have to have good laws, we also need to make sure people know we have good laws because, we definitely want people to believe that their votes do count and they are being counted properly.
I see. Yeah, you mentioned drop boxes, and I'll share my thoughts about drop boxes and polling places. But you mentioned 2020 elections. You do believe in Article 2, right? That states elect state electors, and state electors elect the president of the choice, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But with drop boxes, for example, in Arizona, there was a case that was heard by the Supreme Court that they changed a few polling places to certain residents and citizens, but yet, and they had to go vote to that polling place. But with ballot boxes, citizens can go around and drop their ballots anywhere they see a ballot box. I think that's a little bit, unequal because you're telling the voter that if you want to go vote in person, you have to go vote in your polling place, which is about probably maybe 20 miles away or 10 miles away, but you can just drop your ballot in any drop box. And I think they should be, if you want to drop your ballot in a ballot box, it has to be in your area, in your registered area where your polling place is, not if you work in downtown Boise and you could drop your ballot box there, but you live in Horseshoe Bend. So if that's something that you are looking to make it more equal, I would strongly support that.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of drop boxes in general. I mean, obviously, if you're going to have them, you got to have it really, monitored, recorded cameras, or, all kinds of stuff like that. But I in general, would not a fan of drop boxes. I would get rid of them if it was up to me. But if I can't get rid of them, I want to make sure they're absolutely secure and people monitor, not having people just dropping off ballots in the middle of the night, like we've seen, this 2,000 mules, where people are just in there, all just, I mean, and maybe those votes were legit. I don't know. I think we'll probably never really know. But it does seem awfully suspicious on the whole thing. So
I see.
I don't think drop boxes are really confidence-inspiring tools that we need for voting.
And you brought up 2,000 Mules by the former convicted felon Dinesh D'Souza. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I thought the thing was actually very compelling. I thought it was more compelling than anything else I'd really heard on the issue of voter integrity and stuff. And so I've never really heard a good counter to it. Maybe it's out there. But I think definitely there was a lot of votes. And, I think they presented it right at the end of the movie, too. Like, hey, it could be these votes were all legit in a sense that these people would have voted that way anyway. We don't know. It was also really suspicious when you have someone in the middle of, 2 o'clock in the morning dropping off 30 ballots in one shot. And they're probably you assume they're getting paid to do that, right? So just that kind of stuff is, it's not confidence inspiring. It doesn't look good. And it does seem like there was some cheating going on. You don't know whether those votes were, you don't know whether those votes really would have happened or not anyway. It's just kind of like, it'd be impossible to prove, right? I mean,
But you're not willing to restrict your voters' right to vote. You just want to make it more secure. So you would find ways to give them more security on their mail-in ballots and absentee ballots, correct?
Well, I vote in person on election day. That'd be my first choice for sure. But I don't want people. I don't want you running around your neighborhood and collecting 50 other ballots and dropping it all off for them. I think that's just right for abuse and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I didn't quite agree when I think it was in Pennsylvania where you had local party officials going to nursing homes to pick up the ballots of, senior citizens and people who were ill or couldn't move. If anybody should be picking them up, it should be either a postman or somebody at at polling places. But I don't believe party officials should be able to pick up those ballots because that would bring corruption. But I do believe that if somebody can't vote, then a mail-in ballot should be a way to vote. You just have to enforce it, which is Article 2's constitutional right to protect mail-in ballots and all that, and the way to do it. But okay, no, that's interesting, Rob. And go ahead.
I'll say one thing that happened interesting here this year was the Idaho's presidential primary. So it was scheduled initially that Idaho would have a presidential primary in the first week in March, but the primary for me and everybody else, state legislative races and whatever else, would happen May 21st. So it'll be two separate primaries happening, but the primary was moved into March because they were trying to make Idaho a little more relevant to the primary schedule, right? Mm-hmm. But then through basically a mistake of the legislature, they passed a bill that repealed the March primary, right? That got through and signed, but then nobody realized to the very end, I guess, that there was no replacement for it. So we got left out with no presidential primary. So there's a big uproar, and people, blaming each other and stuff, and there were even some of the legislators were even blaming a non-elected official for testifying against the bill. But so what happened? So the Republican Party, at least, I don't think the Democrats made a move on this yet. The Republicans voted in a caucus in the first week in March. So Idaho will have a caucus, that first week in March for president. So we'll get the different candidates out here. Hopefully, we'll be actually one of the first states out there. So. We were able to, and I was part of the Republican, state committee effort to switch over to a caucus so we'd have, some relevance here. That means the state GOP has to pay for it, so it's no longer a taxpayer-funded event, which, I don't know, that's fine with me. And the Republican Party is a private organization, the Democrat Party is a private organization. Why should we be paying for primaries, or caucus in this case? So we will have that caucus there, privately funded. So it'll be a little bit different than what we had here previously. And so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Okay, so it no longer has a presidential primary. So what? The presidential primary is with the May 24th primary, correct?
No, there is no presidential primary here. That's what I mean. They got rid of it without replacing it.
Oh, I see. So
yeah.
So then you'll not have a primary for GOP or Democrats then?
For president. They'll have it for everything else. The state legislative race and stuff, they'll still be there in May.
That's since I really don't care less about federal government or presidential primaries, I would have to applaud for the state legislature for doing that and concentrating on Idaho's state legislative races and governor races. So I don't see an issue in that. I'm actually happy that Idaho doesn't have a presidential primary. So then, we've seen so much gluttony and populists with presidential candidates. So, the less we see of them, the better. Particularly one person, but I think it's. You
don't like Chris Christie? Is that what you're saying?
No, no, Rob, I don't.
I think he's trying to be he's angling to be a host on MSNBC. I think that's his game.
I'm sure he's practicing to be a host somewhere, not Fox News, but probably CNN or MSNBC. But no. As you well know, that I'm still abstaining. The only one that kind of has got me intriguing is Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, but just a little bit. But going back to your no primary in Idaho, I think that's a good move to get away from that whole horde of federal government bureaucracy and all that crap. So I would support that, and I would support more your local primaries.
Gotcha. Yeah, one small step for man, one giant leap for Idaho, I guess.
Yeah, or orange. Oh, never mind. Never mind. So, anyway, so that's interesting. All right, Rob. It's always. Do you have any last voices to our listeners and followers, and to your electoral base? And what is your message that you really want to prove to your future constituency?
Yeah, thanks, Walt. I appreciate you having me on. I mean, again, I'm running for District 8 and running to replace the current Republican. Of course, he voted. I want to protect kids from this woke mob stuff. This stuff is just really out of control. It's one thing for adults to make decisions, it's another thing for children to have this stuff forced on them and that kind of stuff. But I also want to lower taxes. I'd like to help separate Idaho from Washington, D.C. I think a lot of the problems that we have here in Idaho are really linked to those ties from D.C. I think we could improve our educational system out here. I think we could have a better, government system here, quite frankly. It would leave us alone. That might make for some hard choices, and might have to have some pushback here on some stuff. But definitely, I think that's what people in Idaho, I think, here want. I think it's what this district definitely wants. So that's something we definitely want to do here. I'll stand strong on Second Amendment issues and personal freedoms. And now we got this, COVID here coming back up again. I think, is Joe Biden going to try lockdowns again and mask mandates and vaccine mandates? We never really protected, people in Idaho from vaccine mandates. Now, the government in Idaho didn't mandate vaccines, but there was a bill that would have protected workers from being fired or not getting a shot, and that bill was vetoed, here. So, and the guy I'm running against also voted against that bill. So that's something I'd like to see happen. And kind of hope that issue might have gone away, but it looks like it might be coming back up here again. So, unfortunately, some big issues. I wish I could say that things are hunky-dory. But really our country, is facing a harder time right now. I think there's financial issues, stock market's in jeopardy here. I think the real estate market nationwide could suffer greatly here. So we've got some tough times ahead, and we're going to need people in there who are willing to take stands and make tough issues and stand firm on stuff. We can't, it's not the time just for people to go there up to DC or Boise or anywhere just to go along to get along, but to stand firm for what's right and really do what's best for our country in the long run.
Oh, that's great. No, for the best for your state, not your country, for your state, state sovereignty.
But I'm still an American, too. I still want our country to do well. I mean, I can't fix our country, from the 8th District of Idaho, but I can still, root for our country to do better than what we're doing here.
Well, yes and no, but that's, your first primary concern is your home state, your state and local localities and stuff like that. And then, as far as the federal government, we need to cut that. But, let's get off of this trend of protecting the homeland or, make America great again, or this populist illusion that we've been hearing on and off. And then with COVID coming back on, well, just off note, if someone decides to go to jail, then maybe COVID won't come back. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we'll see that person in Leavenworth, so we won't see COVID. So, but anyway,
that's a whole other episode. We need to come back for that one, man.
Exactly. No, but Rob, on the topic at hand, it's great having you. I wish you all the best. So, if everybody has any questions to Rob Beiswenger, he's running for candidate in State House District Number 8. He also has a Facebook page on Idaho for Rob. And what's your website?
Idaho, the number 4 Rob. IdahoforRob.com.
Okay. Yeah, check them out. If you're in Idaho, I know I got a couple of friends on Facebook that are Idahoans. And if you're not, Montana, check out Idaho. As I said at the beginning of my program, that, Idaho has great economic growth, less taxes in a little bit, and less regulations. So Idaho is a great place. And Rob, I wish you all the best. And have yourself a great night, everybody. And thanks a lot.
Have a good night. Thank you.